Today we're going to talk about how to use Fusion JavaScript index pipeline stage to manipulate data. We'll go over some common cases, look at some code. This presentation is mainly for data engineers and people who have to make this stuff work. So before we get into the topic, I'd like to quickly review that Lucidworks is a San Francisco-based company with offices around the world. We are the primary sponsor of the Apache Solr project, which powers search for some of the internet's largest sites and many of the world's largest companies. Solr is the core of our product, Lucidworks Fusion. So let's review Lucidworks Fusion briefly. Lucidworks Fusion is a platform that includes a highly scalable search engine coupled with AI and machine learning functionality to give you the most relevant personalized results. In addition, we have Fusion App Studio, which automates and accelerates the tasks necessary to develop search applications, meaning the world does not need someone to write yet another search box with type ahead and suggestion functionality. Just use App Studio, include it, and skin it for your organization. The idea behind Fusion is you're able to connect your data wherever it lives. There's over 50 different connectors, and when you actually include what kinds of data sources, so we don't go and say, gee, we can look at Oracle and SQL Server and MySQL and whatever, we say we've got a JDBC connector. So you'll see some solutions out there that say, we connected 2,000 data sources, and it's like, okay, but like 50 of the ones you listed are relational databases, and they're all connected with the same connector. But we connect to your data wherever it lives. You're able to access the data the way that you want it. You already know REST APIs. You already understand some text search analytics. You already know SQL. You're able to use these sorts of tools and technologies that you're already familiar with in order to work with Fusion. Fusion also supports a security model that can be enforced from end to end. It'll interact with your Active Directory or Kerberos or LDAP, and you're able to enforce that single sign-on such as SAML. You'll be able to enforce your security rules from end to end, including that you may have content in your, say, SharePoint repository, and you're like, I don't want you to see documents in your search that you're not going to be able to access anyway. Well, we've got security trimming and other features that make that possible for you. The other thing is this allows you to ingest data from multiple different data sources and use different types of analysis, such as graph capabilities and what have you, to detect relationships between the data and do the kinds of graph-oriented searches, other types of analysis that are in today's modern data analytics. Fusion gives you a unified view for managing and monitoring performance and uptime, load balancing, failover, recovery, multi-tenancy. Additionally, we have personalized recommendations that aggregate user history and actions and highlight items for exploration and discovery. There are machine learning models that are pre-tuned and ready for production. You just add intelligence to your own apps from our already developed functionality. We have powerful recommenders and classifiers so that you can do collaborative filtering, understand intent, do things like items user recommender or item recommender, so that you can basically just plug in your application signals and use Power of Fusion to improve the kind of results and recommendations that you're getting. We offer predictive search that suggests items and documents before a user even enters a query. You have full control over relevancy with simulated previews before going live. So we'll actually sort of look at the next workbench as we go through this, and you may manipulate data with JavaScript and save that within production or what have you. You'll be able to see what that does to your data in advance. There are also rules for boosts and blocks of data, all the kinds of things that you may need to do to improve relevancy and intelligence. We now have Fusion App Studio, which lets you prototype applications in hours rather than weeks using a modular library of UI components. It offers fine-grained security, which is fortified for industries across the Fortune 500, government agencies, and so on and so forth. This is a stateless architecture, so apps are robust and easy to deploy and yet highly scalable. It supports over 25 different data platforms, so there are different data sources and what have you that also plug into Fusion App Studio, and of course Fusion plugs into it as well. There's a full library of visualization components for charts, spits, and graphs and more. We're not going to look at that a lot today. We're focused on ingestion, but it's certainly something that you may want to look at, especially if you need the paginate data, do faceting, geospatial mapping, all of the heat maps, all of those sorts of things. Rather than having to develop UI from scratch, somebody's already done this for you. You just include it and skin it for your organization. So now let's get to the meat of the topic, since we've reviewed things that Lucidworks has to offer and what Fusion is and what Fusion has to offer. We're going to get into ingesting and querying in Fusion. Well, ingesting and querying in Fusion is governed by pipelines. This is the pipeline we're going to focus on mostly today. This is the data ingest pipeline. Fusion's ingestion process involves data going through a connector. So that's like the JDBC connector or a REST endpoint through a series of parsers for specific data shapes like zip files or HTML or Word docs. After the data is parsed, it's then sent to an index pipeline which consists of stages. The last stage sends it to the underlying search engine Solr. So for developers that remember design patterns, this is the chain of responsibility. This is really what the heart of it. Likewise, on the cloud, we have a query pipeline that consists of a set of stages, the last of which sends the query to Solr to retrieve the data, and then the data goes back up to stage, like trim out things you want to see for security. But today we're mostly going to talk about the index pipeline. You see here that I've ingested a series of articles from Wikipedia. I have a connector, a set of parsers. I've expanded in the left-hand side the index pipeline. It consists of 3 stages so far. On the right, you see a simulated set of results. Fusion has an extensive library of pipeline stages that cover everything from renaming fields to mapping data types, to date types, to entity extraction using natural language processing techniques. We're not going to go over the query side of things much today, but this is the query workbench and a series of query pipeline stages. Fusion comes with a library of pipeline stages, from basic faceting, the security trimming, the boosting results based on what other users clicked on, and advanced machine learning-based search recommendations. There's also a JavaScript stage on the queries pipeline side of things, but we're going to focus on the index pipeline side today. Without further ado, let's look at the JavaScript index pipeline stage. So this is the Fusion JavaScript index pipeline stage. In fact, this is my pipeline for querying Wikipedia cat pictures. I've used this for other webinars, such as the site search in 1 hour that I did earlier this year. Like most pipeline stages, you have a condition which governs whether the stage executes at all. That's the top part where it says condition. I find that a bit less important for the JavaScript stage, since I can basically include that in the script body anyhow. You can paste a script in the body, which you see it where it says script body and you see some script in there, or click on Open Editor and edit it in a larger window. For my cat pictures app, if you recall, I used a script to create a preview field from the content body. That's all I'm showing part of right here. So the script you see in there just creates a preview. And we're going to go over that in a moment. So we mentioned that Fusion has a lot of pre-built pipeline stages that you can just configure and use to manipulate data. Why would you want to use the JavaScript stage as opposed to just building a pipeline of pipeline stages? And this is actually a debate that we have internally at Lucidworks too. And here's basically where I stand on this. Pre-built pipeline stages are great for complex functionality like NLP, entity extraction, natural language processing entity extraction, or machine learning classification, or anything where the configuration just makes a whole lot more sense than the code. And pipeline stages are great for common types of field transformations like date parsing, or where you're just going to run a regex on one or a series of fields. But if you've got a bunch of things that you need to do in order to convert one field, then having a bunch of stages seems to me to be a little less optimal. Additionally, if you've got a condition that governs a lot of different functionality or whether a series of things should be done, then I think using a JavaScript stage is a better solution. Moreover, a lot of companies have this functionality that they're using elsewhere that is already in JavaScript or more easily translated. I, in general, don't want to do anything that feels like programming by form fields. Simple configurable data transformations, yes. Coding via form field, not so much. The core of what we'll be working on in the JavaScript index stage is a pipeline document. Let's look at its basic interface. You can find the Java doc for the pipeline document at the Lucidworks documentation site. It has a lot of different functions, but the basic ones that you will use are for adding, removing, getting, or setting fields. Some of the common ones are listed here. And you will see add, get all fields, get fields, so on and so forth. In the body, you're going to put an anonymous function. Let's look at the basic forms of that. So this is the function declaration that's going to go in the body of the JavaScript pipeline stage. This is the common version where you just want to manipulate a pipeline document and return the manipulated one. So you've got some data, it's come through the parser, or it's come out of the connector through the parser, through this JavaScript stage. You've got basically a document, a JavaScript, you've basically got a document at this stage, and you're going to manipulate that pipeline document, change fields, do whatever you're going to do to it, and then you're going to return. Sometimes in order to do things, we need context, like whether the document is a signal, basically an event, like a click or query, as opposed to normal data. Or you may want to pass a key value, you may want to pass key value data to another pipeline object. So if you're doing something, you see something in this document, and you want to say, hey, I saw this thing, other pipeline stage, go ahead and run based on this assumption, then you can set those sort of key value pairs and then look at them in later pipeline stages. So if you need to inject context, this is how you do it. You add, instead of just doc, you have doc and CTX, or you can call it whatever type of context. And you can find the Java doc for that context on our website at the link shown. If you want to know the name of the collection you're operating on, you can use this form of the function. So now we've got doc, context, and collection. If you want, if you're going to perform index or query operations from inside your pipeline stage, you have to have the Solr server component injected. And again, you can find the Java doc for that Solr server component on our website as well. If you're going to look up things in other collections or manipulate other collections from inside your pipeline, you can have Solr Client Factory injected. This was renamed Solr Client Factory from Solr Server Factory, but most of the documentation examples are still shown as Solr Server Factory. All the function elements are injected by index. You can call it your signature instead of, like I did, Solr Server Factory. You could call it Solr Client Factory, and that would be fine. Heck, you could call it Bob if you wanted to. So let's look at some common sorts of things that you can do with JavaScript. The idea here is to give you some code recipes that you can then use to come up with your own ideas or solve your own sort of ingestion and data manipulation problems. If you want to replace a field, you can call docSetField with the field name and the field value. And you see that at the first actual line of code there, where it says docSetField. If you want to add a value, then you can use addField. If the field is multi-valued, so if in the schema you've specified that this is a multi-valued field, which in Solr or in Fusion, a field can have more than one value, basically an array of values, if you will. Then if you do add field, it'll add another value, or it'll add an additional field if it's not a multi-valued field. If you want to combine two fields or include conditionals, this shows latitude being combined with longitude to new point field. So what we're doing here is I'm looking at if you've got this latitude field, and if you do, I'm checking to see if you've got the longitude field. And if you do, then I'm taking the first field value that has latitude, and I'm taking the first field value that has longitude, and I'm adding together, and I'm putting them in a new point field called actor1GOP. So this gets mapped to a point field, basically XY coordinate. Sometimes you want to look through a set of fields. Here we get the field names, so you see where I say .get field names. Then iterate through them, then get the values. This function, as I've written it here, is sort of useless in itself. Presumably we do more than log, but you get the idea. Speaking of logging, we can do info, error, debug, etc. What shows up in the log in terms of level is configurable. You're wondering where these will show up by default. Here's where the messages can be emitted in general. It'll be under var, then log connectors, connector log, under your Fusion 3.1 whatever version you use. In case you missed my webinar about cat pictures, above you see that I've taken body T field that is parsed from a Wikipedia page. Then I create a field called preview T. I grab the value of body T, the body field, operate on it with a regular expression, which ditches the new lines and tabs. Next, I trim the field to 500 characters and store it in the preview T field. Frankly, this is sort of a very simple preview. I could also parse the HTML and make sure I don't get any header information or grab specific parts of the article, but this was, good enough for a demo. So basically, I'm taking out the new lines and tabs and truncating it to 500 characters, arbitrary, the first 500 characters. Fusion's parsers generally do a good job of taking a file and then turning it into the appropriate number of multiple documents. However, sometimes you need to grab bits and pieces and create new documents. In other words, you need to bust up a document, and this creates a new set of documents. Note that in this case, we're returning a collection of documents instead of just one. So I'm going through, I grabbed the field price, and I grabbed the ID from the document. I'm basically creating a new set of documents with the ID and the count as I loop through the different prices, and adding the field's name and value. So I'll end up basically with a collection of just these price documents. Sometimes you want to look something up in another collection. So if we're in the middle of our collection, I've grabbed some, if we're in the middle of this and we want to look something up in products as we go through our document, I can do that with the Solr server factory that I've injected. So in this, we specify that we want to import the Solr4j client libraries. And then with that, we're going to get the first field from our document, our pipeline document called SKU. We're going to go through and see if there are any mentions if it has a field mentioned, and then we go and get the products that were mentioned in it, and then we do some stuff with that. So we're able to basically go from our collection in our pipeline, so from our document that's been passed into our pipeline, and then go grab some other collection from our Fusion instance, and then do things to that, get things out of that collection to help us transform and do whatever we're doing for our document. Sometimes we are indexing something and we see something that we don't like in our pipeline stage. So here we're seeing that there's this value foo, and we apparently don't want to index documents that have this value, this field in it, this value for foo. So we'll return null, and that'll stop this document from being indexed. That's how we reject the document. So in a lot of cases, I have some Java functionality I want to access. So I need to get that library, obviously, in the class path when I launch Fusion. But from the JavaScript perspective, this is how I go ahead and instantiate the type. So here I've instantiated a Java array. This would be sort of useless thing to do. But if I've got some Java library I'm trying to call to get values back and forth, and then I want to manipulate it, manipulate things using that Java library from my JavaScript pipeline stage, I can do all that like so. So this is what you need to build and maintain if you want an intelligent sort of search application. So you can grab Fusion, ingest. So for our next steps, for the things we want to do to start playing with this, you guys can start on this today if you like. Grab a copy of Fusion, ingest some data, create a JavaScript pipeline stage, and manipulate the data. You can find some basic documentation, including some of the examples that I presented at the custom JavaScript indexing stages documentation on our website. I also suggest that you may want to attend a Fusion training, and if you want to get a little bit more in depth into manipulating the data via Solr, you can also attend, say, our Solr development training. Obviously, if you're going to be doing these sorts of large-scale enterprise or retail or site search or support search, then it's pretty helpful to get support from Lucidworks, since we've done this for lots and lots of different companies and know where all the bodies are buried. So having us there to back you up is always helpful. So consider getting support. So that's the main crux of my presentation. So that we've gone through and looked at how we access things with JavaScript. We've looked at the overall way that we include a JavaScript function. We talked about the pipeline document. We talked about the times that you would use this. Again, this is in the index workbench inside of Fusion. We added this JavaScript stage. We then paste our JavaScript function in here, or you can go into Open Editor and it gives you a larger view. So that's the start of where we do this. We talked about why we'd want to use JavaScript. We talked about when we wouldn't want to use JavaScript. And yeah, so open to, thank you guys for attending. We're open to any questions you may have.
So we don't have any questions at this time, so it looks like we can go ahead and wrap up. If you do have any questions, feel free to send them to us at events@lucidworks.com, and we will filter them to the appropriate people to follow up with you. Everybody who registered for this webinar will receive a link to the recording shortly. Again, if you have questions, send them on over, and we'll put you in touch with someone from the Lucidworks team. We hope you enjoyed the webinar and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, guys.